The sound of Brandon's laughter slithered through the crack beneath our bedroom door. Not the warm chuckle I'd fallen in love with years ago, but something cruel and unfamiliar that made my stomach twist. I pressed my ear against the wood, my silk robe catching on the rough grain. "You should see her, man. Playing house like some 1950s sitcom wife. It's almost pathetic how she gave up everything for this." His voice dripped with contempt. "Best decision I ever made, convincing her to quit that fashion nonsense. Makes things so much easier to manage." My fingers curled against the doorframe. I'm Eve, and until this moment I thought I knew my husband. Funny how 10 seconds of overheard conversation can unravel 8 years of marriage. "Yeah, she actually believes I'm working late most nights." Another laugh. "Trust me, she's not going anywhere. I've made sure of that." The carpet beneath my feet suddenly felt like quicksand. My mind raced through 100 little moments, the suggestions about quitting my design job, the gradual isolation from friends, the joint account he insisted on managing. Each memory shifted, transformed from acts of love into calculated moves on his personal chessboard. I backed away from the door, my reflection in the hallway mirror catching my eye. The woman staring back wore perfectly applied makeup, a designer robe, his choice, and an expression I didn't recognize. When did I become this person? My phone buzzed in my pocket. Maya, my best friend from college. The one Brandon said was too ambitious for her own good. The one who'd started her own fashion line, while I was learning to perfect Brandon's favorite recipes. "Eve, you won't believe what just happened." Maya's excitement crackled through the speaker. "Remember that boutique fashion show I told you about? One of my featured designers just dropped out, and I need someone to fill the slot next month." Brandon's voice drifted through the door again, discussing some business deal I probably wasn't supposed to know about. My free hand clenched into a fist. "Eve, are you there?" "Yes," I whispered, moving further down the hallway. "I'm here. Look, I know things are complicated with Brandon, but this could be your chance. Your sketches were always better than mine, and I've seen what you can do. Just think about it." The front door opened downstairs, Linda, Brandon's mother, letting herself in with her spare key. Another weekly inspection of my housekeeping, no doubt. Her heels clicked against the marble foyer, each step like a countdown to another afternoon of passive-aggressive comments about my domestic skills. "I have to go," I told Maya, hearing Brandon end his call. "But, send me the details?" "Of course. Love you, girl. And Eve, it's time to wake up." I ended the call just as Brandon emerged from our bedroom, his perfect smile firmly in place. "Hey, sweetheart. Didn't hear you out here." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I forced myself not to flinch. "Mother's here for lunch. Did you remember to make her favorite salad?" "Of course," I replied, matching his smile with one of my own. "I remember everything." His eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for something. I kept my expression pleasant, empty, the way he liked it. After a moment, he nodded and headed downstairs to greet his mother. I watched him go, this stranger I'd married, and felt something crystallize inside me. Maya was right. It was time to wake up. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The fashion show was in 1 month. That gave me 4 weeks to uncover whatever Brandon was hiding, to figure out just how deep his manipulation went. 4 weeks to plan my escape. I touched my wedding ring, twisting it once around my finger. "Game on, darling," I whispered and followed my husband downstairs. The sketch pad felt foreign in my hands after 3 years. I traced hesitant lines across the page, glancing between my work and the bedroom door. Brandon was downstairs watching television, his nightly routine predictable as ever. The scratching of my pencil seemed deafening in the quiet house. My phone lit up with Maya's latest text. "How's the design coming? Remember, simple but bold. Your signature style." I stared at the half-finished evening gown on the page. The neckline was too conservative, the silhouette too safe. Everything about it screamed, Brandon approved. With quick, angry strokes, I started over. The bedroom door opened. I shoved the sketch pad under my pillow, but not fast enough. "What's that?" Brandon's voice carried that dangerous lightness I'd learned to recognize. "Just doodling." I forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep." He crossed the room in 3 steps, reached past me and pulled out the sketch pad. His eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening. Doodling? This looks rather professional. It's nothing really. Just something to pass the time. Like that lunch with Maya yesterday was nothing? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Linda saw you too at that little cafe downtown. Funny you didn't mention it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran into her by accident. We just caught up. Don't lie to me, Eve. He tore the page from the pad, crumpling it in his fist. We talked about this. That world isn't good for you. Remember how stressed you were? How unstable. I wasn't. You were a mess. His voice softened with practiced concern. I saved you from all that. Why would you want to go backward? The words hit like precise little daggers, aimed at old insecurities he'd carefully cultivated. But this time I heard the manipulation beneath the concern. You're right, I whispered, looking down. I'm sorry. He dropped the crumpled sketch into the wastebasket. I'm only thinking of you, sweetheart. Now about dinner tomorrow, Lucas and his wife are coming over. Wear that blue dress I bought you. After he left, I retrieved the crumpled drawing and smoothed it out. The lines were still there, defiant beneath the creases. My phone buzzed again. Maya. Got the fabric samples. When can you come see them? I thought about Brandon's words about Lucas coming tomorrow. Lucas, who was always watching Brandon with that strange mix of envy and knowledge in his eyes. Lucas, who might know things about my husband's secret life. Tomorrow, I typed back. Lunch break. And Maya? I need a favor. The next evening, I wore the blue dress and played the perfect hostess. Brandon beamed with approval as I served his favorite appetizers, laughed at his jokes, kept everyone's glasses full. Eve's quite the homemaker, Brandon told Lucas and his wife. Best decision she ever made, leaving that fashion nonsense behind. Lucas's eyes met mine across the table. Really? I remember those designs of hers winning some award back in college. Quite talented, wasn't she? Brandon's hand tightened on his fork. Ancient history. Not that ancient, Lucas continued, swirling his wine. Saw some similar work at Maya Collins' latest show. Reminded me of Eve's style. The silence that followed was absolute. Brandon's smile became fixed, artificial. More wine. I offered, standing quickly. In the kitchen, my hand shook as I opened another bottle. Brandon followed me in. What did you do? His whisper was razor sharp. Nothing. I met his gaze steadily. Ancient history, remember? His fingers wrapped around my wrist, hidden from our guests by the kitchen island. Don't play games with me, Eve. You won't like the consequences. I thought about the secret bank account Maya had helped me set up that afternoon, about the designs already submitted under a pseudonym, about the flash drive in Lucas's pocket containing files I'd asked him to accidentally leave behind. No games, I said softly. Just dinner with friends. Isn't that what you wanted? He released my wrist, but his eyes promised retribution. We returned to our guests, our smiles perfect, our marriage a masterpiece of deception. The game was changing, and for the first time I wasn't just a pawn on his board. The flash drive Lucas left behind was like a ticking bomb on my desk. 3 hours I'd spent combing through its contents, each new discovery making my hands shake worse than before. Bank statements, email threads, photos, a whole shadow life I never knew existed. My husband wasn't just a liar. He was a thief. The bedroom door creaked open. I slammed the laptop shut, but Brandon's mother Linda stood there instead of him, her perfectly manicured fingers curled around the door frame. Evangeline, dear, we need to talk. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. Linda, this isn't a good time. It's about Brandon. She closed the door behind her, her usual imperious manner cracking slightly. And about what happened to his father's company. My throat went dry. What do you mean? I think you know. Linda's eyes fixed on my laptop. Lucas came to see me yesterday. Showed me some concerning documents. The air felt too thick to breathe. Brandon told me the company failed because of market changes. Linda's laugh was bitter. The market didn't empty those accounts. The market didn't forge those signatures. She sank onto the edge of the bed. My husband built that company from nothing. Brandon destroyed it in 8 months. My phone buzzed, Maya calling again. I ignored it. Why are you telling me this? Because he's doing it again. Linda pulled out a folder. These arrived yesterday. Notice anything strange about our joint account statements? I opened the folder with trembling fingers. The numbers swam before my eyes. Transfers, withdrawals, investments I'd never approved. Our savings, our home equity, everything was being systematically drained. He's going to run, Linda said quietly. Just like before. And this time he'll leave you holding the bag. The bedroom door opened again. Brandon stood there, his smile freezing as he took in the scene. Mother, what a surprise. Is it? Linda stood still in her spine. Like those surprise withdrawals from Eve's inheritance? My head snapped up. What inheritance? Brandon's face hardened. Mother, I think you should leave. The money your grandmother left you, Eve, Linda continued, ignoring him. Brandon convinced you to put it in a joint account for safekeeping. Did you ever check where it went? That's enough. Brandon's voice cracked like a whip. No, I said, standing. It's not nearly enough. What did you do with my inheritance, Brandon? He stepped toward me, hand outstretched. Sweetheart, let me explain. Don't touch me. I backed away, clutching the folder. Was any of it real? Any of it at all? Everything I did was for us. Like destroying your father's company was for us? The words felt like glass in my mouth. Like mocking me to your friends was for us? His face changed, something ugly surfacing beneath the polished facade. You've been going through my files. Lucas sends his regards. Brandon moved faster than I expected, but Linda was quicker. She stepped between us, one hand raised. Touch her, and I'll call the police myself. You wouldn't dare. But uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Try me. Linda's voice was ice. I've covered for you long enough. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered it. Eve. Maya's voice was urgent. Where are you? The police are here. They need to talk to you about Brandon's accounts. Brandon lunged for the phone, but I dodged, backing toward the door. I'll be right there. Eve. He started forward again, but Linda grabbed his arm. Run, she told me, her eyes never leaving her son's face. I'll hold him here. I didn't wait to hear Brandon's response. I grabbed my laptop and ran, his shouts echoing behind me. In my pocket, the flash drive pressed against my leg like a key to freedom. The inheritance, the company, the lies, it was all falling apart. But as I drove toward Maya's office, toward the waiting police, I felt something besides fear, relief. The mask had finally shattered, and beneath it was nothing but a coward who'd underestimated us both. Mother and wife, the two women he thought he could control forever, were about to bring his whole world crashing down. Maya's guest room felt like a prison and sanctuary all at once. 3 days since I'd fled our house, and Brandon's messages had evolved from threats to pleading and back again. I sat cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by police reports and bank statements, while Maya paced the room. They're freezing the accounts, she said, hanging up her phone. All of them. The detective says Brandon's been busy this morning, trying to transfer everything offshore. I stared at our wedding photo on my phone screen. He's not even denying it anymore. Eve. Maya sat beside me. There's something else. Lucas sent this an hour ago. She handed me her tablet. The email contained a video file, security footage from Brandon's office, dated last week. I pressed play, my finger trembling. Brandon sat at his desk, talking to someone off-screen. She's getting suspicious. We need to accelerate the timeline. Yes, I know the risks. Look, once the money's moved, she'll have nothing. No proof, no resources, nothing. Just like the others. Others. The word echoed in my head as I watched him laugh, discussing my destruction like a business transaction. There's more, Maya said softly. Lucas found a pattern. 3 women before you, all with similar stories. Marriage, isolation, financial manipulation. Then Brandon disappears with everything, and they're left with his debts. My phone buzzed, Linda calling. I answered on speaker. He's here, she said without preamble. At my house. He's looking for documents your father-in-law left behind. Did he find them? No. Linda's voice hardened. Because I burned them years ago, after what he did to his father. But Eve, listen, he's desperate. He mentioned a meeting tomorrow night. Something about finalizing transfers. Maya grabbed my arm. The fashion show preview. It's tomorrow night. I know. I looked at the design spread across the bed. My secret work for the past month, my path to independence. He'll be watching for me there. Then don't go, Linda said. It's not worth the risk. I touched one of the sketches, a dress designed to look demure at first glance, but with hidden strength in its structure. Like me? No, I said. That's exactly why I have to go. But I need your help, both of you. The plan came together quickly. Linda would keep Brandon occupied with false leads about the documents. Maya would handle the show arrangements. And I would be the bait. The detective wants you to reconsider, Maya said after another call. It's dangerous, letting him think he's cornered you. That's exactly what we need him to think. I stood, gathering the evidence we'd collected. A cornered man makes mistakes. My phone lit up with another message from Brandon. Come home, sweetheart. We can fix this. Remember how lost you were before me. You need me. Once those words would have made me doubt myself. Now they just made me angry. What if he suspects something? Maya asked. What if? A knock at the door cut her off. We froze, but it was just Lucas looking exhausted. They found more accounts, he said, dropping into a chair. Hidden under company names. The money. It's not just yours he stole. There are investors involved, people who trusted him. Powerful people. Good, I said, and both of them stared at me. The bigger the crime, the harder the fall. Eve. Lucas hesitated. He's not just running this time. He's planning something else. Something worse. I thought of the wedding photo still glowing on my phone screen. The happy couple, smiling at a future that was built on lies. Let him try. I picked up my latest design. A gown in deep crimson, sharp as a blade. Tomorrow night, everyone will see exactly who Brandon Thompson really is. Including those powerful investors. Maya touched my shoulder. Are you sure about this? I met her eyes in the mirror, seeing not the broken woman Brandon had tried to create, but someone stronger. Someone who'd learned to turn pain into power. Absolutely, I said. It's time to end this game. The lawyer's office felt too small, too warm. I watched her read through the documents we'd gathered, each page turning like a death knell for my marriage. Outside, rain streaked the windows, distorting the city beyond. This is extensive, she said finally, looking up. Financial fraud, identity theft, multiple victims. Mrs. Thompson, why haven't you gone to the police yet? Because he's already moving the money. I handed her another file, the one Lucas had delivered this morning. And because of this, she scanned the new documents, her expression darkening. These threats, they're from the investors he defrauded? They think I'm involved. My voice stayed steady though my hands shook. That's why I need everything to happen tomorrow night, before they decide to take matters into their own hands. My phone buzzed, another message from Brandon. The house feels empty without you. Come home. We can start fresh. The lawyer, Catherine Mills, according to her desk plate, studied me. The fashion show is a risk. If he suspects anything, he already does. I showed her the surveillance photos Maya's security team had taken. Brandon outside her office, Brandon following Linda, Brandon watching Maya's boutique. He's getting desperate. Then why give him an opportunity to? A knock interrupted us. Linda entered looking pale. They're moving up the timeline. Brandon just called his broker. He's transferring everything tonight. What? I stood too quickly, knocking over my chair. But the police said. The police don't know about his contact in Singapore. Linda's voice cracked. He's using father's old connections. Once that money moves, we lose everything, I finished. Including the evidence. Catherine shuffled through the papers. We could file an emergency injunction. There's no time. I grabbed my phone, dialing Maya. Change of plans. The show needs to happen tonight. Tonight. Maya sounded panicked. Eve, we can't. We have to. Get everyone ready. And Maya? Make sure those investors get their invitations. All of them. I hung up before she could argue. Linda touched my arm. Eve, think about this. If it goes wrong. It won't. I pulled out the flash drive containing Brandon's complete financial history. Because he doesn't know about this. Or about the offshore accounts Lucas found. Or about the other women coming forward. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Lucas. Brandon just left the office. He's heading to the bank. Catherine stood. Mrs. Thompson, as your lawyer, I have to advise against. I'm not hiding anymore. I gathered the evidence files. 8 years I let him control everything. Not tonight. The rain had stopped when we left the office, but thunder rumbled in the distance. I checked my reflection in a window. The woman staring back wore determination like armor. The police will be standing by, Linda said as we walked to our cars. But they can't move until he incriminates himself. I touched the flash drive in my pocket, in front of witnesses. My phone buzzed one final time. Brandon again. I know what you're planning, sweetheart. Don't make me stop you. I showed Linda the message. She gripped my hand. You don't have to do this. But I did. Because somewhere in the city, 3 other women were living with the wreckage Brandon had left behind. Because his father had died believing his son had betrayed him. Because I'd spent 8 years becoming smaller, quieter, less myself. Tonight, I said, getting into my car. Brandon learns what happens when you underestimate the women in your life. Linda nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll see you at the show. As I drove toward Maya's boutique, where my designs waited like weapons in their garment bags, I thought about Brandon's last message. He thought he was threatening me, but he'd given me exactly what I needed, proof that he knew. Proof that everything that followed would be premeditated. The storm was gathering just like us. The women he'd tried to break, the colleagues he'd betrayed, the mother he'd disappointed. Tonight, Brandon Thompson would walk into a trap of his own making. Drawn by his need to control, to dominate, to win. And I would be waiting, wearing a dress the color of revenge. Maya's boutique hummed with nervous energy as models rushed between racks of clothing. I stood before a mirror, adjusting the crimson dress that had become my armor. Through the curtained doorway, I could hear the crowd gathering. Investors, police, Brandon's victims, all playing their parts in tonight's performance. He's here, Lucas whispered, appearing beside me. With his lawyer. My hand stilled on the fabric. The money. Transferred 10 minutes ago. To accounts we can't trace. The victory in his voice made my stomach turn. Right on cue, my phone lit up with a message from Brandon. Checkmate, sweetheart. Maya burst in, panic in her eyes. Eve, we have a problem. The investors, they're not just angry. They're dangerous. One of them was talking about making examples. A commotion erupted outside. Through the gap in the curtains, I saw Brandon working the room. His perfect smile firmly in place. But there was something else. Something in the way certain men watched him, their hands hidden in expensive jackets. This isn't just about money anymore, is it? I asked Lucas. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You should have told me who those investors really were. You knew. Everyone knew. He stepped back. Why do you think I helped you? Better you than me when they came collecting. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Lucas hadn't been helping me. He'd been using me as a shield. The show starts in 5 minutes, Maya said, her voice shaking. Eve, maybe we should run. Brandon's voice cut through the backstage chaos. He stood in the doorway, looking immaculate in his designer suit. A bit late for that, don't you think? Security should have stopped him. Would have stopped him if they hadn't been paid off. Another detail I'd missed, another thread in his web. The money's gone, he said softly, approaching me. The evidence too. Amazing what a good IT team can do with the right motivation. My hand went to my pocket where the flash drive should have been. Empty. Looking for this? He held up the drive. Linda was kind enough to help me retrieve it. Mothers can be so protective of their sons. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Linda wouldn't. Already did. He smiled, that same smile I'd once loved. She's out there right now, explaining to everyone how her unstable daughter-in-law orchestrated this whole sad affair. The troubled woman who couldn't handle the pressure of marriage, who invented conspiracies about her loving husband. Maya stepped forward. We have copies. No, I said quietly, understanding flooding in. We don't. Because you're working with him too, aren't you? Her silence was answer enough. Brandon moved closer, his cologne suffocating. Did you really think you could beat me at my own game? I made you, Eve. Everything you are, everything you have. It's all because of me. Through the curtain, I could see Linda speaking to the investors, tears in her eyes. Perfect practice tears. The crowd was nodding, sympathetic. The police officers were putting away their notebooks. The show must go on, Brandon whispered. You have two choices. Walk out there, apologize for your confusion, your stress-induced paranoia. Come home where you belong. Or those investors find someone to blame for their losses. Someone weak, unstable, expendable. The crimson dress felt like blood against my skin. 8 years of manipulation, of careful planning, all leading to this moment. But not the moment I'd planned. Time to choose, sweetheart. I looked at Maya, who couldn't meet my eyes. At Lucas, already edging toward the exit. At the crowd beyond the curtain, waiting for the show to begin. Brandon held out his hand, wedding ring glinting under the lights. Come home, Eve. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the loss of everything I'd built. It was the realization that he'd known me better than I'd known myself. Known exactly how far I'd go. Exactly how I'd try to fight back. Exactly how to turn it all against me. The show was about to start, and I was exactly where he'd always wanted me. Alone, discredited, and running out of options. I took his hand. The spotlight felt like an interrogation lamp as I stood before the crowd. Brandon's hand possessive on my waist. The investors watched with predatory eyes, waiting for my confession, my surrender. Tell them, Brandon whispered, his fingers digging into my side. I stepped up to the microphone, my crimson dress catching the light. My name is Evangeline Thompson, and I need to apologize. The back doors burst open. 3 women entered, each wearing designs I recognized, my designs from years ago. Brandon's grip tightened painfully. Hello, Brandon, the first woman said. Sarah Mitchell, his first wife. The one who'd disappeared to Europe. Impossible, he breathed. You're not real. The second woman smiled. Rebecca Chun, wife number 2. Like the offshore accounts you thought you emptied tonight? The crowd murmured. The investors straightened, suddenly alert. What's happening? Linda demanded from the front row. Eve, what have you done? The third woman stepped forward. Amanda Torres, the last victim before me. We did exactly what you taught us, Brandon. We played our parts. The unstable wives, the paranoid women who'd lost touch with reality. My turn. I pulled away from Brandon's grip. While you were busy destroying my evidence, we were gathering theirs. The flash drive was a fake, Sarah explained, holding up her phone. The real records? They've been with the FBI for weeks. Brandon lunged for the microphone, but I was faster. The money you transferred tonight? It's already frozen. Every account, every shell company. You're lying, he snarled, but his perfect facade was cracking. The thing about making someone invisible, I continued, addressing the crowd, is that they can watch you without being seen. Sarah's been tracking your finances for years. Rebecca documented every fraud. Amanda recorded every threat. The investors were moving now, blocking the exits. Not police in disguise as I'd thought, but federal agents. And me. I turned to Brandon. I gave you exactly what you expected, the weak wife, the easy target. Because you never bothered to ask about my life before you. About my degree in financial forensics, or my internship with the white-collar crimes division. Linda stood, realization dawning. You knew I was working with him. Of course. Just like you knew what he did to Father's company. The difference is I chose justice over protection. Brandon's hand shot out, grabbing my throat. You think you've won? I still own you. I made you. No, Sarah said as agents surrounded us. You broke us. So we rebuilt ourselves. Together. His grip tightened. I'll destroy you. Brandon Thompson, a federal agent, stepped forward. You're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. As they pulled him away, Brandon's mask finally shattered completely. This isn't possible. Tell them, Mother. Tell them she's lying. But Linda just watched, tears falling. Real ones this time. I'm sorry, son. I can't protect you anymore. The agents led Brandon past his previous wives, past the investors he'd defrauded, past Maya and Lucas who stood frozen by the exit. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide his desperation now. Eve, he shouted. You need me. You're nothing without me. I touched my throat where his fingers had left marks. No, Brandon. You're nothing without us. The women you thought you'd erased? We became your worst nightmare. We became visible again. The doors closed behind him. In the sudden quiet, Sarah approached me. It's over. Not quite. I turned to the crowd. Now about that fashion show. The spotlight felt different now. Not an interrogation but a revelation. As Brandon's victims took the runway wearing my designs, each telling their story through the clothes I'd created, I finally understood. True revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about rebuilding ourselves. Maya caught my eye from the back, mouthing, "I'm sorry," but I turned away. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, but some victories didn't need forgiveness to be complete. The crimson dress moved with me as I joined the others on the runway. No longer a weapon but a declaration. We were done being invisible. The courtroom emptied slowly, a tide of whispers and sideways glances washing past me. Brandon's sentencing had drawn quite the crowd. Former colleagues, victims, curious strangers hungry for justice served cold. I remained seated, watching him being led away in handcuffs. He turned at the last moment, searching for something in my face. Recognition, perhaps. Regret. Instead, I smoothed the fabric of my dress. My own design, steel gray like storm clouds breaking. Ready. Sarah touched my shoulder. The other wives stood with her. A chain of survival stretching back through Brandon's past. Almost. I pulled out an envelope, the divorce papers finally signed. Just need to deliver these to my lawyer. Linda intercepted me at the courthouse steps, her perfect makeup unable to hide her exhaustion. Eve, wait. I have nothing left to say to you. Then listen. She pressed a key into my palm, old brass familiar. To the lake house. Brandon's father's real records are in the wall safe. The combination is my birthday. I closed my fingers around the key. You knew. All this time you knew where the evidence was. I thought I was protecting him. Her voice cracked. Instead, I helped him become this. I studied the woman who'd shaped Brandon into the weapon he'd become. You know what the difference is between us, Linda? When I saw what he really was, I chose to stop him. You chose to enable him. And I'll live with that choice. She straightened her spine, ever the proper society matron. The house is yours now. Do what you need to with the evidence. The lake house key felt heavy as I walked away. Another weapon, another choice. At my new studio, Rebecca and Amanda were already setting up for our first official collection. Survivors Designs, we called it. Clothes that told stories of resurrection. The investors called, Rebecca said, sorting through fabric samples. They want to back the full line. And Maya. Still trying to reach you. I picked up a piece of silk, letting it flow through my fingers. The same shade as that crimson dress from the show, but transformed into something else, something stronger. You don't have to forgive her, Amanda said quietly. Or any of them. I know. I draped the silk over a mannequin, pins glinting like tiny daggers. But I'm not designing for them anymore. Sarah arrived with coffee and news. Brandon's appealing the sentence. Let him. I stepped back, studying the draped silk. He can't hurt us now. That's not what I meant. She hesitated. He's claiming you orchestrated everything. That you manipulated us all into testifying. I thought of the lake house key in my pocket. The evidence that could bury him deeper, ensure he never saw freedom again. The perfect revenge, gift wrapped by his own mother. Eve. Sarah watched me carefully. What are you thinking? I pulled out the key, letting it catch the light. One last weapon in a war I was tired of fighting. One last chance to prove I was smarter, stronger, more ruthless than him. Instead, I dropped it into the trash. I'm thinking it's time to create something new. The others understood. We'd all faced this moment. The choice between destruction and creation. Between living in his shadow and stepping into our own light. My phone lit up with another message from Maya. Delete. Another plea from Linda. Delete. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be redesigned, transformed like silk under skilled hands. The show opens in 3 weeks, Rebecca said, returning to work. What are we calling the collection? I touched the silk on the mannequin, feeling its strength beneath the delicate surface. Not armor anymore, but a second skin. Not a weapon, but a testament. Phoenix. I said, picking up my sketchbook. We're calling it Phoenix. The studio filled with the sounds of creation. Scissors cutting clean lines, pins marking new boundaries, machines stitching broken pieces into something beautiful. Outside, the city moved on, unconcerned with our small victories. But we knew. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemy's world. It's in building your own.
Hi there, I'm Ava. I work as an insurance agent, a job that keeps me glued to my desk or on the phone most days. I live in a cozy house that my grandma left me when she passed. It's a bit old-fashioned but filled with memories and comfort. My life's pretty routine: work, home, a bit of gardening, and then some more work. Dating? Who's got the time? After another long day filled with claims and paperwork, the loneliness of the big, quiet house really hit me. That's when I thought, why not try online dating? I took a couple of decent pics in front of the house and some from my trips to Europe last summer, slapped them up on a dating site, and hoped for the best. Barely had I refreshed the page when a message popped up. It was from Ethan. His profile showed a guy with a confident smile, standing in a garage full of cars. The caption said he ran his own car repair shop. Just my type, a guy who knew how to handle tools. We hit it off right from our first chat. Ethan was straightforward, no airs about him. He said, "Hey Ava, I see you've been to Italy. Got any good travel stories?" I laughed, typing back quickly, "If getting lost in Venice and ending up on a private gondola counts, then yeah, loads." "Sounds like my kind of adventure," he replied. And just like that, we kept messaging back and forth. He had a sense of humor that made even a bad day good. Our first date was at a local diner. Nothing fancy, just good burgers and fries. When I saw him waiting outside, leaning against his beat-up truck, he waved and grinned. It was easy to smile back. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the milkshakes we ordered. Ethan was all about his shop and the cars, and I shared tales from the insurance battlefield. But when he talked about his family, his tone changed a bit. "I owe a lot to my mom, you know? She raised me by herself." I didn't think much of it then. I was too caught up in his stories, his laughter, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his latest car restoration. By the end of the evening, I was glad I took the plunge into online dating. Ethan was a breath of fresh air, someone who seemed genuinely into the things I cared about. We made plans to meet again, and I went home feeling something I hadn't in a while: excitement. The more we dated, the closer we got, and it didn't take long before we were talking about a future together. He was easy to love, with his quick smiles and the way he'd fix anything that broke around my house, just like he promised. But as our wedding day neared, Ethan dropped a bit of a bombshell on me. "You know, Ava, my mom and I are really close," he said one evening as we were scrolling through potential wedding venues on his laptop. "I mean, she's pretty much my best friend." I smiled, finding his devotion sweet. "That's really nice, Ethan. It's good to see a man who cares about his family." "Yeah, she's been through a lot, just us two for so many years. She means the world to me." He glanced at me, maybe checking to see if I was okay with this level of attachment. "Of course, I get it," I reassured him, squeezing his hand. I met Maggie a week later at her quaint little house that seemed frozen in another era. Ethan had hyped up how much she was going to love me. But the reality? It was like hitting a wall of ice. She was polite, sure, but there was a stiffness to her smile, a reserve in her hello. During dinner, I tried to make conversation, really I did. "This casserole is delicious, Maggie. Ethan told me you're the best cook." But Maggie turned to Ethan, ignoring my attempt. "Ethan, did you look into that garage space for rent down by Baker's Street?" I sat there, stirring my food around the plate, feeling more like a spectator than a part of the family. It didn't get any better as the night went on. Each attempt I made to draw her out was met with brief answers and swift diversions back to Ethan. On our drive home, I couldn't help but express my frustration. "Does your mom not like me?" I felt like she didn't really want to talk to me at all tonight. Ethan was quick to defend her. Nah, she's just not very good with new people. Give her time, she'll warm up to you. I wanted to believe him. I really did. So, I brushed it off and focused on the wedding plans. But every visit after that was a repeat performance. Maggie's warmth surfaced only when she wanted to know about my financial stability or the house I lived in. So, Ava, Maggie began one afternoon, a sudden interest lighting up her face as we discussed the wedding guest list. This house you live in, it's the one you inherited from your grandmother, right? Yes, it's been in the family for years, I said, cautious, but trying to keep the conversation friendly. And I suppose you have everything sorted out with your finances? Savings and such? Her eyes were sharp, assessing. I stiffened, feeling like I was under a microscope. Yes, I've been very careful with my finances. That's good, that's good. It's important to have a solid foundation, especially in a marriage, she added, her gaze flickering between Ethan and me. The conversation drifted back to mundane wedding details, but the seed of unease was planted. Maggie's questions lingered in my mind, painting my thoughts with doubt. What was her angle? Was she just being overly protective, or was there something more calculating beneath her questions? Ethan seemed oblivious to these subtleties, always smoothing over any awkwardness with a joke or a change of topic. Mom's just being mom, he'd laugh whenever I brought up how she made me feel. As the wedding day drew near, the excitement I felt was tinged with nerves, not just about the big day, but about everything that was becoming increasingly complicated with Ethan's family. A question that had been nagging at me finally slipped out one evening while Ethan and I were checking off items on our to-do list. Ethan, how come your dad isn't on the guest list? I asked, trying to sound casual, but I was genuinely curious. He looked up from his list, a frown briefly crossing his face. My dad? Ava, he left us when I was just a kid. He made his choice, Ava. I don't see any reason to drag up the past now. I nodded, respecting his feelings, but something didn't sit right with me. It felt like there was more to the story, and on a whim, I decided to dig a little deeper. Using a bit of my insurance sleuthing skills, I managed to find a contact number for Ethan's dad, Michael. The next day, while Ethan was at work, I made the call, my heart racing as it rang. Hello? The voice on the other end was cautious, reserved. Hi, Michael? My name's Ava. I'm Ethan's fiancée. We're getting married soon, and I thought you should know. I stumbled through my introduction. There was a pause, a heavy silence that made me think he might just hang up. But then he spoke, his voice laced with a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. Ava, that's news. But listen, I think it's best if I stay out of it. Ethan's made it clear he doesn't want me in his life. His words were calm but firm, yet he added something that sent chills down my spine. Just be careful, Ava. With him and his mother. There's more going on there than you might realize. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, bewildered. Was he just a bitter ex-husband and father, or was there really something I needed to be wary of? Shaking off the unease, I decided he must just be a little out of his mind, as Ethan had implied. The wedding day arrived, and it was like a dream. Everything was perfect, from the weather to the flowers. But even the most beautiful day couldn't keep the shadows at bay. Maggie, Ethan's mother, was a force to be reckoned with. From the moment the ceremony started, she was ever present, hovering close to Ethan, adjusting his tie, whispering in his ear. At the reception, I hoped we could finally have our moment, but Maggie had other plans. When it came time to cut the cake, she brushed past me, a tight smile on her face. I'll handle this, dear, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. I am the main hostess, after all. I watched, stunned, as she took the knife and started slicing the cake, her other hand possessively on Ethan's shoulder. The guests clapped, but the applause felt hollow. I felt more like a guest at my own wedding than the bride. Throughout the evening, Maggie made sure to position herself prominently in every photo, always inserting herself between Ethan and me. Her laughter was forced, her joy seemingly more about her victory in maintaining control than about our happiness. Ethan and I settled into my grandmother's house. Everything was going smoothly, or so I thought, until the dynamic shifted dramatically with Maggie's regular intrusions. Every weekend, we'd go over to Maggie's for dinner, and it was like stepping into a minefield. She was all sweet smiles to Ethan while serving up a side of snide remarks to me. "Ava, try the roast. You might learn a thing or two about cooking," she'd say, her voice dripping with a sarcasm that made my skin crawl. Ethan would just chuckle, clueless, or maybe just unwilling to catch the barbs. "Mom's right. Nobody cooks like her," he'd laugh, completely missing the tension. One Sunday, as she filled Ethan's plate with a heap of mashed potatoes, she shot me a look that could chill coffee. "Darling, make sure Ava takes some notes. She might finally get it right." Ethan roared with laughter, not seeing the hurt in my eyes. "Good one, Mom." 3 months into our marriage, I came home from work to find Maggie on my doorstep, her suitcases piled beside her like some fortress wall. "Ava, dear, I'm feeling unwell, and it's just not safe for me to be alone anymore. I hope you don't mind if I stay here for a while." Before I could even process the request, Ethan came rushing over, wrapping his arms around her. "Of course, Mom. You're always welcome here." Just like that, she moved in. It was as if I had no say in my own home. Maggie took over the house with an iron fist and a velvet glove for Ethan. She did nothing around the house, claiming her health was too frail, leaving me to pick up the slack. My home quickly felt more like a prison, and Maggie was the warden. In the evenings, the living room turned into their private club. They'd watch TV together while I was left to my own devices, feeling more like a ghost than a wife in my own home. Weekends were even worse. They'd go shopping without me, as if I didn't exist. One evening, I gathered my courage at dinner. As we sat at the table, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Maggie, do you have any idea when you might be feeling better? To maybe go back home?" The room fell deathly silent. Ethan's fork clattered to his plate as he stared at me, his face contorting in anger. "Are you trying to kick my mom out?" he exploded, his voice filling the room with a cold fury I hadn't seen before. "No, Ethan, that's not what I meant. I was just asking because..." But he didn't let me finish. He stormed off to his room, slamming the door behind him. Maggie sat there, a smug smile playing on her lips, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Looks like you put your foot in it, dear," she taunted, her voice low and menacing. I sat there, stunned and alone, the clinking of cutlery echoing my shaking hands. What was happening? How had my life turned into this nightmare? One morning, I was pulling out my favorite blouse for work when I noticed it looked off. The color was faded, the fabric rough, and the seams slightly torn. Puzzled, I dug through my wardrobe and found more of my clothes in similar states of ruin. "That's odd," I muttered to myself, examining a particularly discolored sweater. Maggie, who was always buzzing around, chimed in with a too sweet tone. "Oh, dear, that's my fault. I mixed up the laundry last week, must have used the wrong detergent. You know how it is, these things happen." Her words dripped with faux concern, but the glint in her eyes said otherwise. It was clear, this was no accident. This was on purpose. And sure enough, none of Ethan's clothes showed any signs of damage. When I confronted Ethan about it later that day, his reaction was dismissive at best. "You know how Mom is. She's getting older, mistakes happen. Looks like you're not taking good enough care of your stuff, Ava." His words stung, and I felt a cold realization settling in. I was alone in this. As days turned into weeks, more of my things started to mysteriously deteriorate. My favorite lipstick found smashed, my skincare creams diluted, Maggie's tactics grew bolder. The strain was unbearable, and one evening, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Ethan, this can't be a coincidence anymore. Your mother, she's doing this on purpose. She's ruining my things," I exclaimed, my voice tinged with desperation. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, he sighed. Look, Ava, maybe you need a break from all this stress. Hey, I know, I've got just the thing. I got us a gift, a weekend trip, a mountain hike. It'll be good for you. My heart lifted at the idea. Really? Just the two of us? That sounds wonderful, Ethan. His face shifted uncomfortably. Well, actually, I was thinking, it could be a great chance for you and Mom to patch things up. She's excited about the trip too. My heart sank. You want me to go hiking with your mother? After everything? It's either that or you don't really care about making our family work, he shot back, a harsh edge to his voice that I hadn't heard before. I was trapped. So, I agreed, defeated and utterly drained. When I told Maggie, her response was unnervingly cheerful. That sounds lovely, dear. We'll have such a good time. She beamed, her satisfaction evident. That night, as I packed my backpack, the weight of what lay ahead felt heavier than any mountain gear. The thought of spending days in the wilderness with Maggie was daunting. The morning of the hike was crisp and cool, the air fresh with the scent of pine and earth. As we set out with our group, Maggie seemed unusually pleasant, chatting with other hikers and even sharing jokes. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. The scenery was breathtaking, with vast landscapes stretching out under a brilliant blue sky. Maggie kept pace and didn't complain, which eased some of my tension. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a new beginning for us. However, as the terrain became more challenging, Maggie began to slow down, her breaths turning heavy. Ava, darling, I need to rest for a bit. Go on, I'll catch up. She gasped, stopping to lean against a boulder. I'll stay with you for a bit. We can go slow, I said, settling next to her. After a short rest, we attempted to catch up with the group, but Maggie's pace was slow, and it wasn't long before we were alone. The sounds of our companions faded into the distance. How far do you think they've gone? Maggie asked, her voice tinged with worry. Please check from that rock over there. You might get a better view. As I climbed the rock, focused on locating our group, I felt a sudden, sharp shove from behind. My feet lost their grip, and I tumbled forward, the ground rushing up to meet me as I blacked out. When I regained consciousness, the pain hit me like a wave. My arms were scraped and bruised, throbbing with each heartbeat. Worse, my leg was twisted at an odd angle, pain flaring with even the slightest movement. Panic set in as I realized Maggie was gone, along with my backpack that had my phone, water, and food. Maggie! I screamed, hoping she was nearby, that this was some terrible mistake. But there was no answer, just the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. As dusk approached, I knew I couldn't stay on the ground, the risk of wild animals was too real. Wincing with every movement, I managed to pull myself onto a large rock, where I spent a chilling, miserable night, shivering and waiting for dawn. At first light, I forced myself off the rock, pain shooting through my leg. I had to find our trail, had to get back to where the bus would meet us. Every step was agony, but the thought of being left behind drove me forward. Hours passed, each one a test of my will. Finally, I heard voices. A group of hikers appeared like a mirage through my tears of pain and relief. Help, please, I need help, I cried out, my voice hoarse. They didn't waste time with more questions. One of them radioed for help while the others made me as comfortable as they could. Eventually, rescue services arrived, and I was transported to a hospital, the pain a constant companion. I woke up to the sterile whiteness of the hospital room, the beeping of machines punctuating the silence. My injuries ached, but the pain was dulled by relief. I was alive, rescued, and far from the perilous cold of the mountain. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks, not just from the pain, but from the sheer joy of survival. With trembling fingers, I reached for the phone on the bedside table. My first call was to Ethan. My heart pounded as I dialed the number from memory, rehearsing the words in my mind. He needed to know the truth about his mother, about what happened. Ethan, it's me, I started, my voice quivering. I need to tell you something important. Your mom, she pushed me off a rock and left me there. His response came fast and fierce, a torrent of anger that I hadn't anticipated. You're lying, he yelled into the phone. My mom told me everything. She said you abandoned her up there and faked your injuries. How could you accuse her of such a thing? I'm not lying, Ethan. It's the truth. She left me there alone. My plea cracked with emotion. You're just trying to tear us apart. I can't believe you'd stoop this low. You know what? I don't want to see you. I want a divorce. His words were like daggers, and before I could respond, he hung up. Stunned, I lay back against the pillows. His words echoed in my mind, a harsh reminder of the tangled web I was caught in. As I processed the shock, a thought surfaced, the warnings from Ethan's father, Michael. Maybe he would understand, maybe he could help. I found his number and dialed with shaky hands. Michael, it's Ava. I need to talk to you, it's urgent, I said as soon as he answered. He was at the hospital within the hour, his expression grave. We sat in the small, cramped space of the hospital room, and I told him everything. Michael listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. When I finished, he sighed deeply. I've always known she was too attached to Ethan, but this is something else. She once tried to harm me too, did something to my car brakes. Wanted Ethan to have everything. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I had no proof, just suspicions. Nothing concrete enough to take to the authorities, he explained, his voice heavy with regret. We need to do something, Michael. We can't let her get away with this, I insisted, the resolve hardening in my voice. That night, lying in the dim glow of the hospital room, I called my mother. It took some persuasion, but she agreed to play a part in the plan we were forming. Mom, just casually mention to Ethan that I'm dying. Say the injuries were worse than they thought. I instructed her, my voice low. The morning after my call with my mother, the hospital room's door swung open. I braced myself as Ethan and Maggie strode in, their faces a mix of faux concern and barely concealed eagerness. I lay there, my breathing shallow, feigning the brink of death as we had planned. Oh, Ava, you look terrible, Maggie said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, but her eyes glinting with something akin to triumph. I moaned weakly, keeping my eyes half closed as Ethan hovered by the bedside, his expression conflicted but mostly impatient. Maggie leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not enough. Everything's going as planned, Ethan. Soon, all this, her house, her money, it'll all be yours. Ethan glanced around nervously before kissing his mother on the cheek. I'm so tired of all this drama, he muttered. It'd be easier if she just went quickly. My heart pounded at their words, a mixture of fear and fury coursing through me, but I held still, waiting for the final piece to fall into place. And to think, Maggie chuckled quietly, her cold breath brushing my face. It was so easy to push her off that cliff. She actually thought I was tired. And when I told the others she'd gone back on another bus, they believed it. That was the moment Michael chose to enter, his timing perfect. Got all that, have you? He announced loudly, holding up his phone, which had been recording their conversation. The color drained from Ethan and Maggie's faces as they realized what had happened. Ethan's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out, while Maggie's initial shock quickly morphed into a scowl. She made a move as if to snatch the phone, but Michael stepped back, blocking her path. The police are on their way, Michael stated firmly. I sat up then, throwing off the guise of weakness. And here's something else for you, I said, holding out the divorce papers to Ethan. His shock turned to horror as he took the documents, his hands shaking. You'll pay for everything. All of it, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Ethan turned to his father, desperation in his voice. You can't let them lock me up, Dad. You'd have no one left. Michael's expression was one of utter disdain. Actually, I will have someone. Ava's pregnant. And I will make sure my grandchild and Ava have everything they need. The revelation hit everyone like a bolt. Ethan staggered as if struck, his face ashen, while Maggie's eyes widened in disbelief. Before more could be said, the police arrived. They listened briefly to Michael's explanation, checked his recording, and then handcuffed Ethan and Maggie. As they were led away, the reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on them. In the months that followed, the trial was swift. The evidence was undeniable, and both Ethan and his mother were sentenced to significant terms. The house became peaceful again, and with Michael's support, I prepared for the new life I was about to bring into the world. When my son was born, it was with a sense of relief and renewal. Michael was there, beaming, as he held his grandson for the first time. "He's going to have a good life," he promised, and I believed him. Working in the high-end furniture game, you meet all sorts. But Jake? He was something else. Every Thursday, like clockwork, he'd stroll into the showroom with a coffee in hand and a lopsided grin that said he owned the place, even though he never bought squat. I remember the first time he walked in. I was arranging a display of Italian leather sofas, real pricey stuff. He sauntered over, his eyes scanning the price tags, but not in the way most folks do. "Hey there," he started, leaning too close to a lamp that cost more than most people's rent. "What's the story with this one? Looks comfy enough to sleep on forever." I smirked, stepping in before he could test that theory. "It's handcrafted. Top of the line. But yeah, definitely not for napping." Jake chuckled, running a hand through his messy hair. "Guess I'll have to keep my shoes off then." We chatted, mostly him asking about the furniture, me trying to gauge if he was serious about buying anything. Turns out, he wasn't. That first day, he left with a wave and a "see you around." One slow afternoon, he dropped by with that same casual swagger. The store was dead, which meant I couldn't avoid a longer convo. "So, Elsie, right? You ever get tired of talking about couches and tables all day?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "It pays the bills. Besides, it's not so bad." "What's your deal anyway? You come in here all the time, but never buy anything. Are you in the biz, or just like messing with me?" Jake's laugh was a full-bodied sound that filled the room. "Nah, I'm not messing with you. Just like the vibe here, I guess. Plus, you're kind of fun to talk to." That day, he stayed longer than usual. We talked about everything, music, movies, you name it. He had an opinion on everything and a story to match. When he finally left, he turned at the door. "Hey, Elsie? You want to grab coffee sometime? Outside of these expensive walls?" I hesitated. This was new territory. "Sure, why not? But if you're planning to run a tab there too, I'm bringing a calculator." "Deal," he said with a laugh, and then he was gone. Coffee with Jake became our thing. Every time we met, he'd pick a spot as eclectic as the furniture he never bought. Each cup of coffee felt like a continuation of a conversation that never really ended. It flowed from furniture to life plans, from jokes to personal dreams. A year flew by since Jake and I started dating. He had this knack for making ordinary days feel like little adventures. It wasn't just coffee dates anymore. We had road trips, late-night movie marathons, and lazy Sundays spent wandering through flea markets. He seemed genuine, you know? Like a real stand-up guy. Then, out of the blue, during a picnic in the city park, nothing fancy, just us and some takeaway sandwiches, Jake got down on one knee. I almost choked on my soda. "Elsie, will you marry me?" he asked, holding up a ring that caught the sunlight just right. I laughed, half because I was nervous, and half because it felt so right. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. I want all my tomorrows to start with you." His eyes were all hopeful, like a kid waiting to see if he'd won the top prize at a carnival game. I didn't need to think about it. Yes, Jake. Of course, yes. The next thing was meeting his folks. Jake had mentioned them, but we hadn't spent time together, and from what he said, they were a bit uptight. He decided it was time to introduce me properly, so he planned a dinner at their place. When we arrived, their house was, let's just say, eclectic. Every corner crammed with some fancy piece from a different era or style. It was like walking into a museum where all the exhibits got mixed up. Jake's mom, Lydia, was as cold as the November air when she opened the door. "You must be Elsie," she said, eyeing me like I was a piece of furniture she couldn't quite place. "Yes, nice to meet you," I managed, trying not to let her scrutiny get to me. We sat down to dinner, and the vibe was stiff. Jake tried to lighten the mood, but his dad, Harold, only thought a bit after Jake mentioned my job at the luxury salon. "So, you work with expensive furniture? Designer pieces?" Harold asked, his tone shifting from indifferent to slightly intrigued. "That's right," I said. "I help people choose pieces that work for their homes." Lydia perked up too. "And you have savings? That's good. Very good." The conversation slowly turned to their interest in my financial stability rather than getting to know me. It was awkward, but I played along. After dinner, Lydia cornered me in their living room turned bizarre showroom. "Elsie, dear, could you suggest something for this room? It feels a bit cluttered," she said, waving a dismissive hand around. I looked around, biting my tongue to avoid saying it looked like a yard sale gone mad. Instead, I put on my professional smile. "Well, you might consider streamlining the styles. Maybe pick a theme or a period you like and build around that. There are some great, affordable alternatives to these high-end pieces that can give you a cohesive look without breaking the bank." Lydia's nose wrinkled. "I don't want alternatives. I want the real deal, the stuff you sell in your store. I just thought, with your discount or whatever, you could help us out." The way she said it, like I owed them something, irked me. But Jake was watching us, a hopeful look in his eyes, like he wanted this to go well. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally, even though I knew I'd be careful about any help I offered. Wedding talks with Jake and his parents were like walking into a hurricane and trying to stop the wind. His folks had their hearts set on a blowout bash. But here's the kicker. Lydia, with her taste for the finer things, dropped this gem during dinner one night. "Women always dream of big weddings, so they should foot the bill, right?" Her smirk told me she wasn't just throwing ideas around. She meant it. I nearly choked on my water. "Well, Lydia, this woman dreams of a simple wedding. We're not breaking the bank or my sanity over one day." Jake, caught in the crossfire, gave me that look, the "please go easy on my mom" look. But nah, not this time. "Elsie's right," he finally said, though his voice had the weight of a man walking to the gallows. "We'll keep it simple." The wedding day came, and true to my word, it was simple, beautiful, but understated. Jake's parents plastered on their best sour grapes faces throughout the ceremony. I caught Lydia muttering to a relative, "You'd think a girl who sells fancy furniture could put on a better show." I let it slide. The day was about us, not them. I was floating, my heart full, as I said I do, to a modest gathering of our closest friends and family in the little garden behind our favorite cafe. Post-wedding life kicked off with Jake suggesting we rent a large apartment. "You can deck it out just how you like," he said, knowing full well his bank account was running on fumes. "I'll pitch in when things pick up for me." So, I signed a lease for a chic place that cost a pretty penny, $2,500 a month. My savings took the hit for the furniture and appliances. I went all out, styling it into a space that could have graced the pages of a design mag. When his parents visited, Lydia's eyes nearly popped out. "This place, it's like something out of a movie," she gasped, touching the suede of the couch like it might vanish. "I want this. All of this." Jake beamed like he'd built the place himself. "Elsie has an eye for style," he boasted to his friends over drinks one evening, the apartment serving as the perfect backdrop for his tall tales of taste. "But the bills? All mine. Rent checks, furniture receipts, you name it." My bank account knew the truth, even if Jake was playing the part of the man of the house. One particularly sharp memory was when Lydia pulled me aside during one of their visits, her voice a mix of honey and vinegar. "Elsie, darling, maybe you could help us do the same with our place? Since you're so good with money and all." The way she said it, like I was some kind of cash wizard, it almost made me laugh. Almost. Lydia, decorating's one thing, but managing money's another. You start with a budget, something realistic. Her face fell. Clearly, budget was a dirty word in her book. But I wasn't about to school my mother-in-law on finances on top of everything else. The grind at the luxury furniture salon paid off. After months of hustling, the bosses noticed, and bam, promotion landed in my lap. They shuffled me over to the wholesale department, a whole new game with bigger clients and bulk deals. The team there was tight-knit, but they welcomed me with open arms. One person, in particular, made the transition smoother, my new boss, Sarah. She was around my age, sharp as a tack, and had an eye for design that even I admired. We clicked right off the bat, swapping stories about nightmare clients and dream projects over coffee breaks. One evening, back at our plush apartment that I'd decked out from my own pocket, I mentioned Sarah to Jake over dinner. She's got this killer instinct for deals, you know? Closed two just this week that everyone thought were dead in the water, I said, passing him the salt. Jake, munching on his spaghetti, looked intrigued. Sounds like a powerhouse. We should have her over for dinner, show off some of your handiwork here. Might be good for your career, huh? So, we invited Sarah over the following weekend. I spent the day tidying up, while Jake decided he was Gordon Ramsay. The menu was his doing: roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans, fancy, but not too over the top. Sarah arrived on time, her eyes widening as she stepped into the living room. Wow, Elsie, this place is incredible. You did all this? All her, Jake chimed in, leading her on a tour. Wait till you see the dining setup. Dinner was lively, thanks to Jake. He was on a roll, cracking jokes, refilling glasses, laughing a little too loud. At some point, he was more of a host than I was in my own home. I caught him a few times, being extra attentive to Sarah, laughing a touch too heartily at her jokes, which were funny, but not that funny. It bugged me enough that I pulled him aside while Sarah was in the restroom. Hey, what's with the show? I whispered, nodding toward the dining room. Jake kept his voice low, a serious look crossing his face for just a second. I am trying to impress her. For you. Maybe she'll speed up another promotion or something. I frowned. I don't need you to charm my boss for a promotion, Jake. I can handle my career. When Sarah came back, we rounded off the evening with dessert, chocolate cake, Sarah's favorite, as I'd mentioned to Jake. He listened, at least when it suited his plans. After Sarah left, praising the meal and the company, Jake slumped on the couch, grinning like he'd won a prize. See? Told you it'd go great. I sat beside him, not quite sharing the sentiment. It was nice, but don't do that again. I don't need a show, just be normal next time. Jake just waved a hand, dismissing my concerns as he turned on the TV. You worry too much. It was fine. But it wasn't fine, not really. His act felt off, like he was playing a part. Since the promotion, my paycheck had grown nicely, which, naturally, led Jake to find new ways to spend it. First up, his wardrobe. Babe, I can't keep wearing these old suits. If you want me to be promoted too, I gotta look the part, he'd argued one evening, thumbing through a catalog of designer suits that cost more than our rent. Fine, we'll update your closet. But keep it sensible, okay? I conceded, figuring if it boosted his confidence, it might help him in his own career. The new Jake was a dapper one, and he was all too eager to show off his revamped style. Not long after the wardrobe overhaul, he had another idea. How about dinner out with Sarah again? Could be fun, right? It sounded harmless enough, so I agreed. The night was a success, full of laughter and pricey wine. At the end of the evening, when the check came, Jake made a show of grabbing it. Let me get that for you, he told Sarah with a flourish. She smiled, a bit awkwardly. Oh, you don't have to, but thank you, Jake. Then, with his hand on the leather folder, he leaned in close to me. Babe, can you cover this? Just play along. Puzzled and slightly annoyed, I nodded, slipping my card to the waiter while Sarah was distracted. Jake was beaming like he'd just closed a major deal, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being played in my own life. This pattern didn't stop. Dinners turned into weekend getaways, which Jake insisted on initiating, and I unwittingly financed. He'd tell Sarah, "Don't worry about the cost, we've got it," while winking at me across the room. It was during one such trip, a luxurious beach resort stay, that I hit my breaking point. As I signed yet another exorbitant bill, Jake clapped me on the back. "Isn't this great? Sarah's having a wonderful time. Good for your career, this." That night, in our hotel room, I confronted him. "Jake, I can't keep this up. These trips, these dinners. It's too much. We're supposed to be a team, but I feel like your bank more than your wife." Jake's face darkened, his voice cold and sharp. "I'm doing this for you, for us. If you can't see that, maybe you should just enjoy it alone. I'm busting my ass here trying to help your career." After that, things changed. Jake started staying late at work, or at least that's what he said. Sudden meetings, unexpected calls, it became his new normal. I was sad, sure, but also furious. I wasn't going to be his meal ticket anymore. The joy of our dinners and trips had soured, turning into a reminder of how much I was losing, not just money, but a partner I thought I knew. The call from Sarah to come to her office immediately sent a cold wave of anxiety through me. What could it be? My mind raced with every possible mistake I might have made, every deadline, every email. I knocked on her office door, my heart hammering in my chest, and stepped inside. Sarah was sitting behind her desk, her expression serious, the usual warmth absent. My gaze fell on an alarming number of bouquets and unopened gift boxes piled in one corner. "Elsie, please, have a seat," she gestured to the chair across from her. "We need to talk about something important." Her tone was so grave it made my stomach turn. I sat down, clutching my hands in my lap, preparing for the worst. Sarah sighed, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of concern and discomfort. "It's about Jake," she started, and my heart sank. "His behavior has been, well, inappropriate." I blinked, confused. "Inappropriate how?" She gestured to the gifts. "He's been sending these. Flowers, jewelry, even designer clothes. It's excessive and, frankly, uncomfortable for me. He's crossing professional and personal boundaries, Elsie." I felt a hot flush of embarrassment. I had no idea," I stammered, feeling naive and foolish. Sarah leaned forward, her voice softening. "I value our friendship, and I respect you immensely, Elsie. That's why I need to be honest. He's making advances. I've told him repeatedly that I'm not interested, that I see him only as your husband, but he isn't listening." I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah. I'll handle it." My voice was a whisper, barely holding back tears. I got home, still reeling, only to find Jake in the living room, a suitcase by his side. His demeanor was light, almost giddy, which only fueled my growing anger. "There you are. I've got news." He beamed at me impudently, as if oblivious to the storm inside me. "I've decided it's time for a fresh start. Quit my job today, and I think it's best if my parents move in here. You should find another place." His words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about, Jake? Your parents? Why would I leave?" He shrugged, annoyingly calm. "Come on, Elsie. This place is too good for just us. And let's be honest, it fits their style more. Plus, you can afford another spot, no big deal, right?" I stared at him, disbelief and anger intertwining. "No big deal? You cheat, you lie, you spend my money, and now you kick me out? Whoa, cheat? What are you on about?" His feigned ignorance was infuriating. "Don't play dumb, Jake. Sarah told me everything, the gifts, the advances. How could you?" My voice cracked, tears threatening to spill. Jake's face hardened. "So what? She's richer and more promising than you, so I just want to get a better life. Just pack up and go, Elsie." His words were a dagger, cutting through any remaining ties of affection I had for him. That night, I lay in the spare bedroom, the reality of my crumbling marriage suffocating me. Jake's betrayal was clear, his intentions laid bare. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I had found a new apartment online, a smaller, quieter place that felt like a fresh start. I signed the lease electronically and called the movers, all before Jake had even stirred from his sleep. As the movers started arriving, I was methodically showing them around, pointing out what to take. I'd gathered all the receipts and proofs of purchase for the furniture, my furniture, that I'd paid for with my hard-earned money. I was ready, determined. Jake stumbled out of the bedroom, bleary-eyed and confused as he saw the movers loading up boxes. "What's going on, Elsie? Why are you taking the furniture?" I held up the folder stuffed with receipts. "Because it's mine. I bought it, I paid for it, and it's coming with me. Any questions?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, the reality hitting him as his eyes swept over the evidence in my hands. Just then, his parents burst through the door. His mother, Lydia, took one look at the scene, movers carrying out chairs and tables, and she lost it. "Stop. Stop right now. Put my furniture back." The movers paused, looking unsure. I nodded firmly at them. "Keep going, guys. It's all documented." Lydia was frantic, her voice rising in panic as she turned to Jake. "How are we supposed to live here without any furniture? What are we going to do?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, don't worry, Lydia. I'm sure Jake's new girlfriend will furnish your lives splendidly," I said, the sarcasm dripping from every word. His mother looked at him hopefully, her eyes darting back and forth between the emptying apartment and her son. "And your little boss is going to buy us all this? Is she going to take care of us now?" I shook my head, almost in disbelief at their audacity. "Actually, I spoke to her yesterday. She wants nothing to do with you or Jake. She's sending back every ridiculous gift he bought." The look on Jake's face was priceless, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and a realization that his schemes were crumbling around him. Lydia's wrath turned to her son as she poked him hard in the chest. "You fool. We could have had a good life here with Elsie supporting us, and you ruined it." Jake's desperation was palpable as he turned to me, his voice shaky. "Elsie, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can start over." I handed him an envelope, the divorce papers I had prepared. "This is the only thing left to start over. My lawyer will call you." As I walked out of the apartment, I didn't look back. I was leaving behind more than just a bad marriage and a duplicitous husband. I was leaving behind the old Elsie who tolerated far too much. Settling into my new apartment was like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for too long. The place wasn't as large as the last, but every square inch of it was mine, truly mine. I threw myself into decorating, picking pieces that weren't just stylish but spoke to my newfound independence. I went for bold colors this time, vibrant blues and emerald greens, each room a testament to starting over. Meanwhile, Jake and his parents weren't faring so well. Last I heard, they couldn't keep up with the $2,500 rent without my paycheck and had to downsize dramatically. They ended up in a cramped, run-down place on the other side of town. Jake refused to settle for a regular job. He bounced around, looking for another golden ticket, while his mom, Lydia, had no choice but to get a retail job. Their palace built on expectations had crumbled, and from what snippets I caught through mutual friends, so had their tolerance for each other. Then, one afternoon as I was setting up a new art piece in the living room, my phone rang. The sweet, sugary tone of Lydia's voice oozed through the speaker when I answered. "Elsie, darling, it's Lydia. How have you been? We've all missed you so much over here." I almost dropped the phone, half laughing, half in disbelief. "Missed me, Lydia, or my paycheck? Let me guess, you want me to come back? To what? Watch Jake chase dreams while I foot the bill? No thanks, Lydia." "You don't understand, Elsie, we're family." She tried again, her voice now a mix of desperation and saccharine. Family? I scoffed. Family doesn't use each other, Lydia. You should try supporting yourselves for a change. Before she could respond, I hung up and blocked the number. That part of my life was closed, sealed, and good riddance to it. In contrast to the chaos that was my past life, my career was flourishing. Sarah and I had grown closer, her respect for me solidifying after I handled the personal turmoil with as much grace as I could muster. She hinted last week that another promotion was on the horizon, something that would put me even more in control of my professional path. It was like the universe rewarding me for all the hardships. One evening, sitting in my newly decorated living room, I reflected on everything that had happened. The apartment looked incredible, a true reflection of my style and spirit. I had new friends coming over that night, colleagues who appreciated me for my skills and company, not for what my bank account could do for them. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door to smiling faces, genuine and happy to see me. As we gathered around the sleek, modern dining table I'd picked out myself, laughter filled the space, bouncing off walls that echoed a new chapter of my life. Hello, I'm Emily. I want to tell you about my life, how it all started so perfectly and then turned into something I never expected. I married Tom, a laid-back guy who ran a small Italian restaurant that his father left him. We lived in a cozy house that my grandma left me when she passed away. It was in this house we started our little family with our son, Jack. In the early days, Tom and I would sit on our back porch after Jack had gone to bed, talking about everything we wanted to do. "We'll save up, buy a big house, maybe have another kid," Tom would say, always with a beer in his hand. "Yeah, and Jack's going to have the best education we can afford. Maybe he'll go to college without needing to worry about student loans," I'd add, thinking about how my own student loans had been a burden for years. Things were good, simple, and happy. But as years passed, while I climbed up the ladder at work, Tom seemed content with just getting by with the restaurant. It didn't grow, it just stayed the same, cozy, but barely making enough. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, I tried to talk to him about it. "Tom, have you thought about maybe expanding the menu or doing some renovations to attract more customers?" Tom shrugged, scrubbing a plate a bit too hard. Why fix what isn't broken? We're doing fine." "But we could be doing better, Tom. Don't you want to grow the business?" I pressed, drying my hands on a towel. Tom set the plate down with a clatter, frustration clear on his face. "Why are you always pushing? Can't you just be happy with what we have? I'm tired of you always wanting more." His words stung, but I let it go for the moment. However, it wasn't just the restaurant that was the problem. As I became the main breadwinner, the tension grew. Tom spent more days at the restaurant, not really working, just escaping the house, and often he'd end up at his mother Susan's place when we argued. One particularly rough day, I decided to confront him about his frequent escapes to his mom's. "You ran off to your mom's again last night? Tom, when you're there, who do you think handles everything here?" He rolled his eyes, tossing his keys on the table. "Oh, come off it, Em. Mom understands me. Plus, she doesn't nag me about money or working more." That hurt, especially since I had been the one covering for his lack of income, even sending $700 to Susan every month to help her out. It was getting harder to keep up with all the bills and expenses. Later that week, I was on the phone with Susan, trying to explain the situation. "Susan, I'm doing what I can, but Tom needs to step up. We're struggling here." Instead of understanding, Susan lashed out. "Emily, you're his wife. It's your job to support him, not push him around. You're always after my boy to change. Can't you see you're the problem?" Her words were harsh, and I felt a wave of anger wash over me. "I am supporting him, Susan. More than you know. I send you money every month, remember? How can you call me the problem?" "You're a gold digger, that's what you are, always counting every penny," she shot back, before hanging up. As the night fell, I watched Tom retreat to the couch, beer in hand, lost in his phone, while I put Jack to bed, the weight of my conversation with his mother heavy on my shoulders. Life at home got tougher when Tom's restaurant hit rock bottom. He had to let go of his staff one by one, till it was just him tossing pizzas in a quiet corner of town. Soon, even the pizza didn't pull enough folks in to keep the lights on. The day he shut down for good, he came home looking defeated but with an edge of defiance in his eyes. "You know, this isn't the end. It's just a bump," he said, trying to keep his voice steady as he took off his apron for the last time. I was sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a deck of bad cards. "A bump? Tom, the restaurant's closed. We need another income, not tomorrow, but now." He bristled at that, his pride wounded. "I'll find something, but I'm not just going to take any job. I've got my standards. I was a business owner, And what does that mean now, Tom? We need real money, not standards," I shot back, frustration boiling over. He just shook his head, muttering about not being any desk jockey at some company. "I have a degree, Emily. I'm looking for a chief's position, nothing less." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Your business just tanked, and you think you can land at the top somewhere else just like that?" I snapped, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. He didn't reply, just stormed out, probably to his mother's. That's how it was now. When things got tough, Tom vanished. The weekend brought no peace, only his mother, Susan, barging in with her own set of demands. She came just as I was setting up lunch, her timing as impeccable as her nerve. "Emily, you need to talk to your bosses. Get Tom a good position at your place. He deserves it," she commanded, as if it were the most obvious solution. I laughed, despite myself. It was a harsh, short sound. "Susan, that's not how it works. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. They don't just hand out top jobs, because I say so." She narrowed her eyes, her lips thinning. "You just don't want him succeeding there. Afraid he might overshadow you, huh? Seriously? Tom walking into a senior role with no experience is not happening. And it's not about fear. It's about reality," I explained, slicing the tension with every chop of the salad knife. Lunch went on with a chilly air swirling around us. Tom was quiet, picking at his food, probably stewing over his own bruised ego and his mother's words. Tom's days became a blur of nothingness. He'd lounge around, beer in hand, glued to his phone, while I juggled work, house chores, and caring for our son, Jack. Each evening I came home to find the house a mess and dinner nowhere on the horizon. "Tom, could you at least start dinner? I'm running on fumes here," I'd say as I dropped my bags, kicking off my shoes. He'd grunt, not taking his eyes off his phone. "Why? You do it better. I'm tired too, you know." Tired from what? It burned me up inside, seeing him so idle, especially when Jack would tug at my sleeve, hungry and waiting. "And Jack? Did you pick him up from school today?" I asked one evening, already knowing the answer. "No, your mom did. Forgot to tell you," he mumbled, barely audible over the TV. My mother, thankfully, lived nearby and had become my unplanned backup, ever since Tom had stopped bothering with even the smallest responsibilities. "Tom, he's your son too. He needs you." I tried to keep my voice even, but it was hard. This would usually be the point where he'd get up and leave, the door slamming behind him, a punctuation to our daily script. And true to form, he'd disappear, off to who knows where, leaving me to handle everything. One day, the routine took a darker turn. I had started noticing money missing from my purse. At first, it was a few dollars here and there, but then whole bills began to vanish. One evening, after double-checking my cash, I confronted him. "Tom, have you been taking money from my purse?" He looked away, then back at me. "Needed some cash for beer." "Beer? Really, Tom? You're taking cash like a thief now?" "How dare you call me a thief? I'm your husband," he shot back, voice rising. Before we could go any further, Susan barged in, her timing impeccable as always. She must have caught the tail end of our argument because her face was thunderous as she laid into me. Emily, all you care about is money. Can't you see the man is struggling? You should be supporting him, not accusing him. Support him? By letting him steal from me? What about Jack? What about our bills? My voice was rising too, the stress of the last few months boiling over. Tom had slumped back on the couch, tuning out the women in his life arguing over him, his gaze fixed on some invisible point on the floor. The argument spun out, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Susan left in a huff, and Tom just sat there, saying nothing, doing nothing. Jack fell ill just as the last light of summer faded. His fever spiked one evening, and no amount of soothing or cool cloths seemed to help. I sat by his bed, thermometer in hand, my heart sinking with each beat that confirmed the fever wasn't breaking. Tom was no help, as usual, sprawled on the couch, lost in the glow of his phone. Tom, can you at least check if we have any more fever reducer in the medicine cabinet? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He grunted something unintelligible and slowly hoisted himself up, but I knew I'd be faster. Jack was whimpering softly, his small hands clutching mine, and every second counted. I brushed a kiss on his forehead and hurried to the kitchen myself. The next morning, the doctor confirmed it was more serious than a simple cold. He needs medication, and we should run some tests. Better to be safe, he advised, scribbling on his pad. Tests meant money. More money than what was left after all the bills and Tom's unchecked spending. I pulled up my banking app, heart hammering as I transferred the last of our savings for Jack's treatment, including the $700 usually reserved for Susan. It was the only option. No sooner had I made the decision, Susan stormed in, her face thunderous. Emily, where's my money? It's the first of the month, you know. I was repacking Jack's small backpack, ready for another trip to the doctor. Susan, I had to use that money for Jack. He's very sick, we need it for his tests and medication. Susan's eyes narrowed, her lips thinning into a harsh line. You expect me to believe you don't have money elsewhere? That was my money, Emily. I need it. I stepped back, holding up my hands, the protective mother in me rising fast. Jack comes first. He's a child, he's sick, and he needs his mother to take care of him. I'm not going to apologize for that. Well, I should have known you'd pull something like this. Keeping money from me for that boy. Susan spat the words out like they were poison. That stung, and my temper flared. That boy? Susan, that's your grandson. How can you be so cold? I don't need lessons from you, Emily. If you don't pay me by tomorrow, you'll regret it, she hissed, her face twisted in anger. The threat hung in the air, heavy and dark. But seeing Jack, so small and frail in the other room, gave me the strength I needed. Get out, Susan. Now. I won't have you threatening me in my own house, not today, not ever. Susan looked like she might say more, but the look in my eyes must have told her all she needed to know. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving a silence that rang in my ears. Tom dressed in silence and followed her out. I returned to Jack's side, my hands trembling as I smoothed back his hair. He looked up at me, his eyes trusting and filled with a pain that broke my heart. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here, I whispered, kissing his forehead, my decision cemented in my heart. The days blurred into a haze of hospital visits and restless nights. Tom's absence in the household was almost a silent relief, no arguments, no disdainful looks. But then, a week of uneasy quiet was shattered. I noticed it first on a mundane Thursday afternoon. Checking my bank app for the balance, my stomach dropped. Several large withdrawals had wiped out nearly everything we had left. Panic tightening in my chest, I scrolled through the transaction history, my heart racing, every withdrawal a stab of betrayal. Calling Tom was useless, he didn't pick up, hadn't picked up for days. With a heavy hand, I blocked the card, cutting off his plundering. It was only then, amidst the swirling chaos of my life, that I realized how deep Tom's selfishness ran. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Exactly 1 week after he vanished, Tom returned, not alone, but with Susan swaggering by his side. They found me in the living room, floor littered with Jack's toys and medical receipts. "Emily, we have news," Tom announced, an unfamiliar smirk playing on his lips. "I won the lottery. $10 million. And before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of it. I'm filing for divorce." The room spun. "You what? Tom, you can't be serious. What about Jack?" His mother laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Emily, always playing the saint. You've underestimated my son all these years. Now he's rich, and you're nothing. He'll find someone better, younger." Tom nodded, picking up a duffel bag by the door. "Yeah, I'm moving out. To live with Mom. You'll manage on your own, won't you? You were so good at it." Susan put her arm around him, leading him to the door. "Let's leave the gold digger to her mess. We have better places to be." As the door slammed shut, the finality of the situation crashed down on me. Betrayal, abandonment, theft, Tom had left me with nothing but challenges and heartache. But as the initial shock waned, a fiery resolve began to build within me. They thought they could crush me, leave me broken and destitute? No, I wouldn't let this stand. I called my lawyer, my voice firm. "Tom used our money to buy that ticket. I want to contest the winnings." My lawyer was cautious, but supportive. "It's going to be a tough fight, Emily, but we'll give it everything we've got." As I hung up, the weight of the journey ahead settled on my shoulders. But there was a strength in me that had been forged in the fires of this betrayal. For myself, for Jack, I would fight. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for survival, I was fighting for justice. The days leading up to the court hearing were a whirlwind of preparation. My lawyer, Mr. Daniels, was meticulous. We gathered every piece of evidence, bank statements, financial records, everything that showed the flow of money from my account to sustain our household while Tom contributed nothing. "Emily, it's a solid case. The fact that he used your bank card to buy the lottery ticket is our ace," Mr. Daniels reassured me as we sat in his office surrounded by piles of paperwork. As the court date approached, tension simmered just below the surface of my daily routine. Then, 2 days before we were due in court, Tom and Susan showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen, Jack playing at my feet, when I heard the familiar slam of the car door. They burst through the door, faces red with anger. "You're actually going through with this, Emily? You're suing your own husband?" Tom roared, his voice filling the small space. Susan was quick to chime in, her words sharp and venomous. "Greedy, that's what you are. Trying to take what doesn't belong to you." I stood my ground, feeling Jack press against my leg, seeking comfort. "It's not just Tom's money. He bought the ticket with our funds that I provided because he couldn't. You just can't stand to see me happy, can you? Always need to be in control, Emily." Tom's face was twisted in a sneer. "It's not about control, Tom. It's about what's fair. You walked out, remember? You and your mother laughed at me, said I'd be left with nothing." My voice was steady, fueled by the flicker of anger that had been ignited by their accusations. The shouting match could have escalated, but I wasn't about to let that happen in front of Jack. "You need to leave. Now. We'll settle this in court," I said firmly. Their departure was loud and messy, but the house felt cleaner even after they left. I hugged Jack close, whispering assurances that everything would be all right. In the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Tom sat across from us, his lawyer whispering in his ear, while Susan glared daggers in my direction. When Mr. Daniels presented the bank statements and financial records, I felt a small victory each time Tom's lawyer faltered in response. The judge listened intently, his gaze often lingering on Tom as the evidence of his financial dependency on me was laid bare. The purchase of the lottery ticket with funds from a joint account, effectively making it a marital asset, is central to this case, Mr. Daniels argued convincingly. Tom tried to argue his case, his voice booming in the quiet of the courtroom. "I was the one who bought the ticket. It was my decision, my luck. But not your money, Mr. Thompson. And luck, unfortunately for you, does not override the law, the judge replied, his tone indicating his impatience with Tom's interruptions. After hours of back and forth, the judge delivered the verdict. Considering the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Thompson was financially dependent on Mrs. Thompson during the period of the ticket purchase. The ticket, therefore, is considered a marital asset. I award 3/4 of the lottery winnings to Mrs. Thompson and 1/4 to Mr. Thompson. Tom's face went white. Susan looked like she might faint. They were stunned, disbelief etched across their features. A few months after the court decision, life settled into a new, calmer rhythm. The divorce papers came through, officially ending what had become a draining chapter in my life. It was time to focus on the future, a future that now seemed a lot brighter thanks to the court's decision. I had heard countless stories of lottery winners who blew through their fortunes with nothing to show for it. Determined not to fall into that trap, I reached out to an old college friend, Mike, who had made a name for himself in the world of investment. Mike, I need some advice on how to handle this situation wisely. I don't want to end up another cautionary tale, I confessed over coffee one brisk morning. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Emily, it's smart of you to think this way. Let's look at some stable investments that can offer you growth and security. We pored over charts and projections, discussing various companies that showed potential. Mike's expertise was invaluable, and by the end of our meeting, I felt confident about where to invest. I think a mix of tech and renewable energy stocks would be a solid choice for part of the funds. And putting a chunk into a savings account for Jack's education sounds perfect, Mike suggested, marking some options on his tablet. Meanwhile, Tom and Susan's handling of their share was the talk of the town. Tom had splurged on a flashy new sports car and was often seen driving around, showing off to anyone who'd pay attention. Susan adorned herself with expensive jewelry and clothes, reveling in her newfound status. One afternoon, while picking up Jack from school, I bumped into an acquaintance who couldn't wait to share the latest gossip. Emily, have you seen Tom's new car? It's worth a fortune. And Susan, she's living it up like there's no tomorrow, she said, her eyes wide with excitement. I just shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. Yeah, I heard. But that's their choice. I'm just focusing on what's best for Jack and me. At home, I updated my financial plans, checking in with Mike regularly. Each decision, each investment, was a step towards a stable and secure life. I was determined to give Jack every opportunity one possibly could, without the shadow of past mistakes looming over us. Mommy, when I grow up, can I go to college like you did? Jack asked one evening as we looked at his newly opened savings account online. Absolutely, sweetheart. And you'll have the funds to do so without worrying about money, I assured him, pulling him into a hug. That's cool. I want to learn lots of things, he said, his eyes bright with the promise of endless possibilities. Gradually, life had normalized into a comfortable routine. Jack was thriving at school, and our investments were performing well. I had managed to put the past behind us, focusing on our future. But then, the past decided to make an unwelcome return. I heard it first from a close friend during a casual coffee meetup. Emily, have you heard about Tom? He's lost everything, his car, the money. Heard he's neck deep in gambling debts now. I sipped my coffee, masking my surprise. Really? That's unfortunate. And Susan, she's been pawning off her jewelry. Seems they're both hitting rock bottom after all that show off, she added, shaking her head in disbelief. It wasn't long before Tom himself stood on my doorstep, a shadow of his former self. His expensive clothes gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded jacket. His eyes, once so full of arrogance, now held a desperate, hollow look. Emily, can we talk? His voice was hoarse, as if he'd rehearsed this speech 100 times. I hesitated but nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Jack was at a friend's house, so we had privacy, not that I wanted to prolong his visit. Tom took a deep breath, looking around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. I've lost everything, Emily. The money, the car. I've got nothing left. And I miss my family. I miss you. I raised an eyebrow, unable to keep the skepticism out of my voice. You miss the money, you mean? No, it's not just that. I've been doing some thinking, a lot actually. I was hoping, maybe we could start over? His gaze was pleading, but all I could see were the years of lies and negligence. I let out a short laugh, more out of disbelief than amusement. Start over? After everything you put us through? You walk out, call me a gold digger, waste your fortune, and now you want to come back like nothing happened? He shuffled his feet, looking anywhere but at me. I know I messed up, Emily. I really do. But I'm willing to change, to be better. Tom, you walked out when you thought you didn't need us anymore. You showed your true colors. Now, you're just sorry because you're broke and alone, I said, my voice firm. He looked deflated, the reality of my words hitting him hard. So, that's it then? There's no chance? Tom, I forgave you a long time ago for my piece, not so you could come back whenever you hit rock bottom. Jack and we're doing great, and I intend to keep it that way. With a heavy sigh, he turned and left, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, feeling a chapter firmly closing behind him. As I picked up Jack later that day, his laughter filling the car, I knew beyond a doubt that no amount of lottery fortune could ever compare to the wealth we had in each other. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it was ours, and it was filled with real, priceless love. Let me take you back to the start. My name is Marcy, and I've been married to Michael for almost 20 years. We met in college, fell hard and fast, got married a few years after graduation, and had Jamie shortly after that. We were the typical suburban family. Michael worked in sales, I managed a local grocery store, and weekends were for soccer games and family barbecues. That particular November morning was supposed to be like any other. I dropped Jamie off at school, he was in his sophomore year and already talking about colleges, scholarships, the whole deal. I was heading to work, but first decided to check our bank accounts. We'd been saving for Jamie's college in a separate account, something we both promised to contribute to regularly. Michael had been a bit secretive lately, saying he was working on a big deal that would benefit all of us. I trusted him, maybe too much. So, there I was, sitting in the car outside the store before my shift, logging into our online banking. What I saw, or rather, didn't see, hit me like a ton of bricks. The balance was zero. Not low, zero. Panic set in first, then confusion. I dialed Michael immediately. Michael, where's the money in Jamie's college fund? My voice was more of a whisper, scared of the answer. What? Babe, calm down. What money are you talking about? His voice had that irritatingly calm tone that always signaled trouble. Marcy, I haven't touched it. Maybe there's some mistake with the bank. Check again. I logged in again, hoping to see a different number. But nothing changed. No mistake, it's all gone. What the hell is going on? Look, I don't know, okay? I'll sort it out. Just go to work, and we'll talk later. He hung up before I could argue further. But I couldn't let it go. I called in sick, turned the car around, and drove straight to the bank. The manager, a nice woman named Janice who knew us personally, pulled up the records. The color drained from her face as she turned the screen toward me. There have been transfers, large ones, to various accounts over the past few years. All authorized by Michael. I stormed out of the bank, drove home, and waited for Michael. When he walked through the door, the look on his face told me he knew he was caught. Marcy, before you say anything. Save it, Michael. Years? You've been stealing from our son for years? My voice was loud enough to shake the pictures on the walls. Stealing? No, I was investing it. In a business, for us. It was supposed to be a surprise. A surprise? You surprise someone with a birthday party, not by draining our son's future. How could you do this to us? I was yelling now, each word sharp and bitter. He started to say something but stopped when he saw the look on my face. He knew this was different, this was serious. I need to think. I can't even look at you right now. I walked away, my mind swirling with betrayal, anger, and the terrifying question of how we were going to afford Jamie's college now. The next morning, my mind was still racing. Michael was already at the kitchen table when I walked in, his mother, Gloria, sitting beside him with a cup of coffee in her hands. The air was thick with tension, and I could tell this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "Michael, I want every penny put back into Jamie's account today," I said, my voice steady but firm. Gloria scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, Marcy, don't be so dramatic. Michael was only trying to help the family." I turned to her, shocked by her dismissal. "Dramatic? It's our son's future we're talking about, Gloria. How can you just sit there and defend him? And besides," Gloria added, "it's about time Jamie learned to stand on his own 2 feet. Why should he rely on us to pay for his education?" I stared at them, dumbfounded. "So, you're saying our promise to our son means nothing? That we should just let him fend for himself?" Gloria shook her head. "Look at you, making a mountain out of a molehill." "I'm not going to stand here and be called hysterical for caring about our son's future," I shot back, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, Marcy, I think it's best if we just cool off. We're obviously not going to agree on this." "No, we're not," I agreed, my mind made up. "I want a divorce, Michael." The room went silent. Even Gloria stopped her tutaying. "A divorce? Over this? Marcy, you need to think about this more clearly," Michael said, his voice low. "I've never been more clear about anything. You took our son's future away, and you expect me to just accept it? No, I can't and I won't. And I want the house in return for all the money you spent. That's my final decision." Michael laughed, a cruel sound that filled the room. "You think you can just take everything? I'll fight you for the house. I'll fight you for every damn thing in that divorce court." I could feel Gloria's eyes on me, her disdain palpable. But I was beyond caring what she thought. "Fine. Fight all you want. But I'm done here. Come on, Jamie, we're leaving." I called out to my son, who had been waiting in his room, probably overhearing everything. As Jamie and I gathered our things, Gloria's voice followed us. "You're making a mistake, Marcy. You'll see. You'll come crawling back." I didn't even turn around. With every step towards the door, I felt a small piece of my old life fall away, but I also felt a strange sense of freedom. Jamie and I got into the car, and I drove us to my parents' house. We were together, and that's what mattered. A week had barely passed when Michael and his mother, Gloria, decided to storm into my parents' house like they owned the place. I was in the kitchen, helping Mom with dinner, when I heard the front door slam open. There they stood, Michael looking smug and Gloria red-faced with anger. "We've hired the best lawyers, Marcy," Michael announced as if he was declaring war. "And they're going to prove that my mother funded the purchase of our house. So, you might want to reconsider your demands, unless you want to lose everything." Gloria stepped forward, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Yeah, and you better just forget about the money Michael took. Accept the divorce and the house split 50-50, or we'll make sure you and your son end up with nothing." "Listen here, Michael," I shot back, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside. "I was the one who made the initial payment on that house. We both know that. Your mother's claim doesn't change the truth." Gloria's face turned an even brighter shade of red. "Lies. My money bought that house, and we're going to prove it. When we're done with you, you'll be begging on the streets." Michael nodded, backing up his mother's venomous words. "It's time you face reality, Marcy. You and your son will be out of that house before you know it. My mother, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. You have no right to come into our home and speak to my daughter that way. Get out, now. But Gloria wasn't done. She scoffed and turned her rage towards me again. You think you're smart, huh? Well, let me tell you something, young lady. It's not just about the house. You're going to lose everything because of your stubbornness. That was when my father stepped up, his presence towering over both Michael and Gloria. I think you've said enough. Both of you, get out of my house now, or I'll throw you out myself. They hesitated, Michael's arrogance fading as he met my father's unwavering gaze. Gloria tugged at his arm, muttering something under her breath as they turned to leave. Once they were gone, the house fell silent except for the sound of my racing heart. My hands were shaking, and I could feel tears threatening to spill over. Later that same day, after dinner had been cleared and we were all trying to find some normalcy, Jamie spoke up. He had been quiet throughout the meal, lost in thought. Mom, I remembered something weird, he began, looking unsure. A couple of weeks ago, I saw Dad and Aunt Linda at the mall. They were in the jewelry store. My heart sank. Linda had been my best friend since high school. What were they doing there? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. They were picking out jewelry. Aunt Linda said it was a gift for you. Jamie's voice trailed off, his expression confused. A gift for me? I repeated, feeling a mix of hope and suspicion. But he never gave me any jewelry. Yeah, and that's what's weird. They were laughing and looked really close. Aunt Linda even told me to keep it a surprise. Jamie frowned, clearly troubled by the memory. My mind was racing. None of this made sense. Why would Michael buy jewelry with Linda and not give it to me? And after today's confrontation, everything felt even more suspicious. I need to get to the bottom of this, I said more to myself than to anyone else. I'm going to hire a private detective. I need to know what's going on. I could feel my resolve hardening. If Michael was cheating on me with my best friend, I had to know the truth. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from the detective I'd hired. His voice was grave as he asked me to come to his office to discuss his findings. My stomach churned the entire drive over. When I arrived, he handed me a thick envelope. Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry to say, the news isn't good, he started, and from there, he laid it all out. The detective had followed Michael and Linda, taken photos, and even got receipts from their purchases, including an expensive necklace that certainly never made its way to my neck. Your husband and Mrs. Linda have been having an affair. I'm very sorry. The drive home was a blur. When I finally got back to my parents' house, I found Mom and Dad in the living room. I told them everything, showing them the photos and receipts. The shock on their faces mirrored the hollow feeling inside me. Oh, Marcy, I'm so sorry, Mom said, her voice breaking as she came over to hug me. That woman has been in our home, shared our meals. How could she? I can't believe Linda would do this to me, I whispered, feeling a tear roll down my cheek. All these years, she's been lying to me, to all of us. Jamie came into the room then, hearing the last part. Mom, are you okay? What happened? I wiped my eyes and managed a small smile for him. It's going to be okay, honey. We just found out something upsetting about Dad and Linda, but we'll get through this. We're together, and that's what counts. That night, as I lay in bed, the betrayal gnawed at me. Michael and Linda had deceived me, stolen from me, and broken my trust. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I would fight back, for my son and for the life I deserved. The next morning, I called Linda and invited her to chat. 2 hours later, I sat across from Linda at the small cafe where we used to meet for our girls' chats, the irony of the situation not lost on me. She seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, smiling as she sipped her coffee. So, how's Jamie doing, huh? Must be getting ready for college soon. Linda asked, her voice light and breezy. I clenched my jaw, staring straight at her. Actually, Jamie's not doing great. He's been robbed by his father's mistress. Her smile faltered, and she set down her cup, a flash of guilt crossing her face. Marcy, what are you talking about? I know about you and Michael, Linda. I've seen the proof. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. Her face drained of color, her eyes dropping to the table. Marcy, I can explain, she stammered, fidgeting with the new ring on her finger. I pointed at her ring sharply. That ring you're wearing? It was bought with money meant for Jamie's education. Money that Michael took from our life savings. Linda's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know, Marcy. He told me he was getting a divorce, that you two were practically done. I scoffed, the anger and betrayal churning inside me. And you believed him? After all these years, you just took his word and didn't think to ask me? To think about Jamie? She wiped at her eyes, nodding slowly. He said he would leave you the house and everything in it. He told me he made enough money to cover it all and that he wanted to leave with dignity. That's a lie, Linda. He's left us with nothing. There's another woman, too, someone from his work. Did you know about her? The words were like venom, but they needed to be said. Linda shook her head, her face crumpling as she began to sob. No, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Marcy. I've been so stupid. For a moment, I just watched her cry, the years of friendship battling with the raw, fresh wound of her betrayal. Then, slowly, I felt my anger start to subside, replaced by a weary sadness. Look, Linda. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were. But I appreciate you being honest with me now. She took a deep breath, nodding as she pulled off the ring and slid it across the table. I'll give you everything back. The jewelry, the car he bought me. It's the least I can do. It won't cover everything. The money's gone, and Jamie's future is up in the air. But it's a start. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Then Linda looked up, her eyes red but resolute. Let me help, Marcy. Let's figure this out together. For what it's worth, I want to make things right. We spent the next hour talking, not about the past, but about what we could do moving forward. Linda handed me the keys to the car Michael had bought her, along with a bag containing the jewelry. I'll do whatever it takes, Marcy. I owe you that much. The morning after my heart-to-heart with Linda, my phone buzzed early. It was Linda again, sounding more urgent than ever. Marcy, you're not going to believe this. Michael's company is throwing a big bash for his promotion tonight. It's at that fancy place downtown. Everyone will be there, including all the big bosses. That evening, we arrived at the restaurant, a sleek, modern place filled with Michael's colleagues in high spirits. I spotted Michael, laughing and clinking glasses, the picture of success. Seeing him like that, so carefree, fueled my resolve. Linda nudged me. Ready? As I'll ever be. Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped forward just as Michael caught sight of me. His smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. What the hell are you doing here, Marcy? You need to leave. No. His attempt to intimidate me in front of his peers only made me stronger. Actually, I'm here to congratulate you, Michael. Mind if I borrow the spotlight for a moment? His confusion was palpable as he hesitated. His boss, Mr. Carlson, noticing the exchange, gestured for me to continue. Please, let's hear what Marcy has to say. With all eyes on me, I moved towards the front where a projector was set up for presentations. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. The murmurs began as I clicked the remote, and images flashed on screen, photos of Michael and the financial director, cozy and compromising. The crowd gasped, and whispers filled the air. Not only has Michael been unfaithful to his family, but he's also been stealing from the company. Here are the financial records to prove it. The next slides showed documents, clear as day, detailing the fraud Michael and his mistress had committed. The room erupted into chaos. Michael tried to protest, his face turning red. "This is nonsense. She's just a scorned woman." But Mr. Carlson, who had been examining the documents closely, silenced him with a raise of his hand. "Enough, Michael. If these documents are real, you've not only betrayed your family but also this company." He turned to the financial director, who was now as pale as a ghost. "And you, Jessica, will need to explain a lot. Security will escort you both out until we sort this out. Consider yourselves suspended, effective immediately." Michael looked like he'd been slapped, his eyes darting around the room, finding no allies. He glanced at me, fury and disbelief in his eyes. But I wasn't done yet. "I trusted you, Michael. More than that, I loved you. We built a life together, a family. And you threw it all away. I hope it was worth it." With those final words, I walked away, Linda at my side, her hand squeezing mine in support. The last thing I heard was Mr. Carlson calling for calm as we exited the building. After Michael and his mistress were fired, they had to return all the stolen money to avoid a lawsuit, a small victory in the grand scheme but a victory nonetheless. Now, I was bracing myself for the biggest fight yet, the divorce and the battle for our house. I sat there with my lawyer, papers neatly stacked in front of us. Michael and his lawyer were across the room, looking less confident than usual. Gloria sat right behind him, her eyes shooting daggers across the room at me. As the judge entered, everyone rose, the room steeped in formality. "Please be seated," the judge commanded, and the session began. My lawyer presented the case succinctly. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence of Mr. Harper's infidelities and misuse of the couple's joint finances. We have bank records, photographic evidence, and testimonies confirming that Mr. Harper diverted family funds to support extramarital affairs." The courtroom was silent, all eyes on us as we presented each piece of evidence. Michael's face grew paler with every document displayed. Then it was Gloria's turn. She stood, almost trembling with fury. "Your Honor, this is all lies. My son is a good man. It's Marcy who drove him to do what he did. Besides, the house they lived in was bought with my money." Her voice was shrill, desperate. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to maintain composure. "Mrs. Harper, do you have any proof of your claims about the house?" the judge asked, his tone skeptical. "Well, I don't have the papers here, but it's true," she stammered. My lawyer then stepped up, handing a stack of documents to the judge. "Your Honor, these are the bank statements and mortgage payments clearly showing that it was, in fact, Marcy who made the initial down payment and subsequent mortgage payments from her personal account." The judge nodded, examining the documents carefully. Michael whispered something to his lawyer, a look of defeat settling over him. Then, the unthinkable happened. Gloria, unable to contain herself, stood up and shouted, "This is all your fault, Marcy. If you'd been a better wife, my son wouldn't have needed other women." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Mrs. Harper, one more outburst like that and I will have you removed from this courtroom." Gloria sank back into her seat, muttering under her breath. After reviewing everything, the judge finally spoke. "Having considered all the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Harper has not only been unfaithful but has also significantly mismanaged marital funds. Therefore, the court rules in favor of Mrs. Harper. The house will remain under her ownership, Mr. Harper will return 50% of the misused funds, and additional compensation for emotional distress will be awarded to Mrs. Harper." Michael looked like he had been punched in the gut, his head hanging low. Outside the courtroom, I took a deep breath of free air. It was over. The lies, the deceit, the years of hidden betrayal, finally out in the open and judged accordingly. Jamie had been there, in the courtroom, seen it all. His father's and grandmother's disgraceful behavior left an indelible mark on him. It was after the trial, on a quiet evening at home, when he came to me, his decision weighing heavily on his young shoulders. "Mom, I can't see Dad anymore. Not after everything. I don't think I want to talk to Grandma Gloria either." Jamie's voice was firm, resolute even, but I could see the pain flickering behind his eyes. I pulled him into a hug, my heart aching for him. "It's okay, Jamie. You do what you feel is right for you. I'm here, no matter what." In the weeks that followed, the idea of remaining in the house that was once a symbol of our family's unity felt more and more impossible. I made the decision to sell it, to give Jamie and myself a true fresh start. We chose a smaller, cozier place not far from the college Jamie hoped to attend, a new beginning within reach of his future. Michael's downfall was steep and rapid. His career was shattered, his reputation in tatters. The last I heard, he was barely scraping by, relying on odd jobs and his mother's pension after the hefty sum he had to return to us. One evening, while Jamie and I were unpacking boxes in our new living room, he looked up from a book he'd just shelved. "Mom, do you ever feel bad for Dad?" His question caught me off guard, a simple query filled with complex emotions. I paused, considering my words carefully. "Jamie, I feel sad about how things turned out." "But feeling bad for him? He made his choices, honey. We all have to live with the results of what we do. What's important is that we try to do better, be better." Jamie nodded, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. "I want to be nothing like him, Mom. And you won't be. You're your own person, with your own choices to make." I ruffled his hair, proud of the young man he was becoming. Life slowly found a new rhythm, our days filled with work, school, and the occasional movie night in our snug living room. I continued my job at the grocery store, the normalcy of work a welcome anchor. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, our new home grew around us like the garden we tended together, slowly, with care, and a lot of love. Reflecting one evening over a cup of tea, I realized that despite the trials, the heartaches, and the upheaval, we had emerged stronger. I had fought for my son's future and my own peace of mind, and won.